In the great geopolitical game, a country has to play its cards carefully, but it also matters what cards it holds. Has the UK's hand become worse? Chancellor Philip Hammond is in China, on the hunt for contracts for UK firms as China rolls out its multi-trillion-dollar international Belt and Road infrastructure construction project. His big speech is tomorrow. But the trip's been cast in an interesting light after a major row broke out over a leak from the UK's National Security Council. The traditional trade-off for UK politicians when it comes to dealing with China has been weighing up economics versus human rights concerns. But now it seems there's a new, perhaps even more sensitive trade-off for them to grapple with: economics versus domestic security concerns. The week in Westminster has been dominated by the UK government's apparent decision to allow the Chinese telecoms firm Huawei to build non-core parts of its 5G mobile phone network. But it's still a deeply controversial decision. The US has been lobbying allies not to use Huawei at all for such projects, arguing that the Chinese company represents a security risk, that the firm cannot be trusted not to spy on mobile networks at the behest of the Beijing authorities. Australia, New Zealand and Japan have banned Huawei from working on their 5G networks, making the UK's decision not to stand out all the more. Huawei says the concerns about it are misplaced.
We will never undertake any spying activities, and we will never accept anyone's instructions to install a backdoor.
It may well be a complete coincidence that the 5G decision seems to have been taken only hours before Mr. Hammond flew to China. But people are asking whether the government's decision to give the green light to Huawei was intended to smooth the path for the Chancellor's business trip. In other words, has economics trumped domestic cybersecurity?
Well, on many social media, people are basically saying, finally, who is China's true friend? Britain is China's true friend and taking Huawei technology. So this is the social media response.
Brexit threatens to make it harder for the UK to trade with the rest of the EU. Ministers want to use the new opportunities of leaving the European Union to strike ambitious trade deals further afield, not least with China. In 2017, the UK exported £273 billion worth of goods and services to the rest of the European Union. That dwarfed UK exports to China of £22 billion. It's this that the UK is so desperate to increase through new trade deals and closer economic ties with Beijing, and to emulate some of the success of Germany, which currently exports more than 3 times as much to China as Britain does.
I think Brexit really weakened the position for the UK to negotiate with Chinese on really difficult issues, because before, when we have the difficult issues like human rights, like normative powers, and UK can really counting the European Union. Of course, the Chinese leadership considering Brexit could be pose a very big opportunity for the Chinese government to sign up some kind of bilateral free trade and investment agreement, and perhaps the Chinese will have a much heavier hand to negotiate those more tricky issues.
Now we're on our own account, and we're going to have to weigh up for ourselves the economic interest, the security interest, human rights interests in some countries, and come out with our own balance, which won't be 100% in favour of our commercial instincts or 100% in security. It's always going to be a balance between the two, risk management, and I think that's the term that we're going to have to get used to.
In February, the Defence Secretary Gavin Williamsons said Britain would send a new aircraft carrier to the Pacific, and that Britain was prepared to use lethal force to deter countries that flout international law. The speech infuriated the Beijing government, and the Chancellor had to drop a planned visit. This trip has gone ahead, but at what cost? And what does it reveal about the UK's geopolitical hand?